changing country. The demographics are changing. It's not a traditional America anymore. And there are 50% of the voting public who want stuff. They want things. And who is going to give them things? President Obama. He knows it, and he ran on it.
Well, that was our own Bill O'Reilly last night, suggesting that President Obama won this election in part because the majority of Americans want stuff and believe that they will get it from President Obama or the Democratic Party. The exit pollsters did not ask anyone about free stuff, but they did find that 43% of people believe the government should be doing more. And those folks who believed that supported President Obama by a 65-point margin. 51% believe the opposite, that the government needs to butt out. And they favored Governor Romney by 50 points. And when it came to finding more money for Uncle Sam, 47% of voters say they want a tax hike on the wealthy. 48% either think everyone should pay a little more or that taxes shouldn't change at all. Let's bring in my panel. Lou Dobbs, host of Lou Dobbs Tonight on the Fox Business Network and a syndicated radio host. Bill Megyn, Vice President of News Corp, the parent company of Fox News Channel, and also a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Not to mention a columnist at the Wall Street Journal. That's a long title. And Alan Colmes, host of The Alan Colmes Show and author of the new book, Thank the Liberals for Saving America and Why You Should. So this is an interesting theory. O'Reilly's been talking about this on his show in his talking points before last night about how he feels like we are morphing into a society in which large sectors of the public are too dependent on the government and believe the government is there to solve their problems and the government has a responsibility to solve their problems and not self-sufficient enough. Lou, your thoughts?
It's been one of the fundamental tenets of the debate between liberals and conservatives in this country for a half century. It is now reaching crisis proportions, if you will. And one of the great barriers to Governor Romney's success electorally was the presence of all of that federal money, but not in the typical forms that people would expect in Virginia because of the military-industrial complex and our defense facilities, not because simply of Social Security or food stamps, but an absolute structural delivery for 40% of the population in Ohio. 40% of the population receiving disability, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid against a candidate who is saying, and with his vice presidential nominee at his shoulder, saying, you know, we're going to be pulling that money back from you at a time when we've lost net 9 million jobs in this country, and we don't have that balance between opportunity and entitlement.
Is there a difference between Medicare and Social Security on the one hand and disability, you know, food stamps, Medicaid on the other hand? Because some of those are, you know, people have put money into the system and then they reap the rewards later.
Yeah, to me, it's not an issue of whether it is, quote unquote, justified, whether it is an entitlement, whether it is a short-term, because of a short-term exigency that it's necessary, that it is a short-term element of the safety net. The fact is, there isn't that countervailing offering in our society. We right now are losing jobs, even though we're talking about an unemployment rate that has moved down. We still have 23 million people in this country who are in pain. And Governor Romney, he spoke about those people, but he did not speak to them. And that was, I think, an essential failure of his candidacy.
Let me get to you on this, Alan.
Well, the issue of entitlements, when you call Social Security and Medicare disability that we pay into and say that's entitlement from the government, I find that a little, as you pointed out, a little different than some of the other things. And on the 47%, you've got veterans, you've got people who've earned those benefits, people who fought for this country. This notion that 47% want stuff, and that's why they voted for I voted for President Obama. I don't want anything. What people really want is jobs, and I think people saw that they were getting jobs. He won Ohio, I think, because of what he did to help save the auto industry.
That's precisely what I just said. I said to you that the countervailing offering in this society right now would typically be opportunity. It would be a job. And right now, jobs aren't being created, in part because we're suffocating from the level of federal spending, and that contest between private and public sector opportunity, you know, is...
But you've heard this many times, going from 800,000 losses of jobs a month to now more and more 100 plus every single month, and how many months in a row of job creation, and they just upgraded the numbers of August and July. So, you know, the fact that people have a sense that things are turning around
but
from where they were 4 years ago. But
the spending, Bill McGurn, the spending has also gone up. Back in 1980, the federal government social benefit spending programs was $219 billion. $219 billion in 1980. 2012, $1.77 trillion.
Right.
The spending is up nearly 300% in the past 20 years. The population only increased by 24%.
Right, right. Well, I think we're losing some of the distinctions. I find it incredible, but I somewhat agree with Alan on the point that it does not matter in terms of actuarial tables, whether something's an entitlement, a tax, or something. It does matter to how people think about it. And that was the problem with the language about takers, that everyone's taking. I mean, I get a home mortgage deduction. I had college loans when I went to school. Mm-hmm. These are all part of it. I do think that there is a danger. It is getting large. And the problem that I have with Alan's solutions is that more government and more spending always seems to be the answer. And once people get on it, it's very, very difficult to get off. And I think one of the big problems is that these entitlements, or whatever you want to call them, the spending, is now reaching not just the poor and so forth. I mean, I don't think we have a problem with benefits to the poor, but to the middle class that could have other options.
But the notion here, the premise is somehow that that Barack Obama wants more people on food stamps, or wants to give people stuff. No, I believe he wants to create a society where people are working and are contributing to the economy. Right. Not that vote for me and I'll give you stuff, vote for me and I'll help you get your life back together so we can have a
I don't know. He played his
constituencies
pretty well in terms of the immigration and that. I think there's a point to that part. And he's been spending. And the spending is reaching, what we've lost is the idea that you can't have benefits, you can't have a safety net or whatever you want to call it without a vibrant private sector. Yeah. And not only is the spending going up, but a man who is successsul was demonized for being successful.
Well, there's that, but it's the old, you know, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man a fish, he eats for the rest of his life. And there's a question about, you know, whether there is this inclination by some on the left, by the president, by the Democratic Party, to give the man the fish as opposed to teach the man to fish. Is that fair?
Got $1.5 billion from the government to save the Olympics. Was that not giving something to people?
I would say
tax breaks he was given with Bain to
but most of us would oppose those too. I mean, I would oppose those too.
Look, I'm a conservative. I'm not particularly interested in reliving the campaign here. Let's look at it honestly. To me, intellectually, it is absolutely irrelevant as to whether one has contributed to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. I am not trying to create a result here politically. I am talking about simply the problem and the issue that we are confronting as a nation. Republicans, Democrats, liberal, and conservative. We have an unsustainable level of spending. We will hear in the course of the next several months a great deal of discussion from this president, from John Boehner and the Republican leadership in Washington, a discussion about a compromise that will involve raising taxes. It will involve some incremental declines in government spending as a baseline level. It will not be significant, it will not be real, and it will not solve the problem. And until we come to terms with the fact that all of this ideological rhetoric is an impediment and outright obfuscation in what should be an important national dialogue and debate that was not had by the presidential candidates because they were fueled, driven, enabled, and embraced by a national liberal media, primarily, that was perfectly comfortable for there to be no debate or discussion of these issues and no resulting national consensus.
And the politicians didn't really make it happen either. You'll be happy to learn that the consensus, at least in the broadcast from Steve Hayes and Chris Stirewalt, is they are likely to kick that can down the road.
Yes.
For another several months, and that's, once again, real leadership from our politicians in Washington. I got to go. No.